Well, hello, church. My name is Dave Lombardo, and I have the privilege of serving on staff as a teaching pastor, along with some other responsibilities here at The Well. Now, I might be a new face to some of you, and that's because I was actually away on a sick leave for the past 4 months, and I'll be able to give you an update sometime soon that'll give you a bit of a more full picture of where I'm at personally and where my family is at. But for now, it is my joy to welcome you today to our virtual service. Today we're going to be starting a new series called The Secret of Greatness. And for the next few weeks, we are going to be learning about ordinary people who lived out extraordinary faith. And even though these people are certainly those who we would refer to as heroes of the faith, the one thing they have in common is not any one particular thing that they did themselves, but rather what we're going to see is that the thing they have in common is that God got a hold of their heart and He helped them see the world the way He does and enabled them to do something remarkable about it. Today we're going to be learning about a man named John Perkins, who's an author, philosopher, civil rights activist, follower of Jesus. And in the weeks to come, we're going to be hearing about Christine Caine and Jackie Robinson and Francis Chan and a woman who many of us have probably heard about named Corrie ten Boom. Not only is today the start of this new and exciting series, but it's also the beginning of All Together Now. Each August, we intentionally curate 1 hour services that are accessible for all of the ages and stages that make up our church. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, I thought they just took the month of August off to give all the kids ministry volunteers a month off. If we're at home, why do we even need to do this at all? Okay, well, it's true. Our volunteers work very, very hard. As a matter of fact, there have been a number of volunteers who have been working behind the scenes and behind the screens, even during this pandemic time. Shout out to all of you. Thank you for what you're doing. All Together Now wasn't started, or it's not primarily about giving volunteers some time off, even though they can use it. It's actually about bringing together our entire church across every age and every stage and choosing to worship and learn and celebrate together. Now, you might be saying, okay, Dave, I get that part of it, but we're not all together. We're actually all over the place right now. Why are we even doing this at all? Fair questions. We believe that it is worth it to join in at the same time as other people, no matter where they may be, to understand that we are actually in this together with others, even though we may not be in the same room with those people. You see, God is building a community of people here at The Well, and we're all leaning in the same direction. And so even though you may be on your own today, even though it may just be 1 or 2 different people, maybe you're there with all of your kids and you're trying to hold back yelling at them to keep them under control, wherever you may be, even though we're physically apart, we're still in this together. For those of you that are by yourself this morning, you may be even feeling alone. Even though you may be on your own, you're definitely not alone. And that's because we are all in this together. Our All Together services have something for everyone. There's 5 minutes of fun, something we've been doing so long as we've been virtually meeting together online. But now that 5 minutes of fun will actually be incorporated as part of the service. There's going to be worship songs that are familiar to our children, songs that they've sung together and learned, whether it be in our Sunday morning programs or our day camp. There's going to be messages, sermons from different members of our pastoral staff about the people I mentioned to you earlier. And these are going to be practical and accessible and engaging and fun with different kind of activities and different kind of perspectives and angles to make sure that everybody is engaged. Lastly, today is a communion Sunday, an important day in the life of our church. We're going to spend time a little bit later on in our service celebrating the Lord's Supper by eating some bread and drinking some juice. And so it'd actually be a good idea for somebody right now to run to the kitchen and grab some crackers or some pita or some bread or some other kind of starchy carb, I guess, and some wine or maybe some grape juice if you prefer, or any other kind of liquid. And later on, any other kind of consumable liquid, I should say. And later on, we're going to be doing communion together. Church, it is good to be together like this, even though we may still have to be apart. Let's jump in to 5 minutes of fun.
Good morning, guys. Welcome to the 5 Minutes of Fun. My name is Hannah Rapetsky, and I am so glad that I get to do this with you this morning. This morning, we are playing a game called Who Dis? So, these famous Bible characters are not in our context, so we have to see if we can figure out who this is. I'm going to be reading you a character description and then giving you a few seconds, and then you just have to see if you can figure out who this is. So the first one. Please don't underestimate me. I have great aim but terrible judgment, but I love God with all my heart. So I'm going to give you about 10 seconds, see if you can figure out who it is. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, this is King David. So that's not one that's too difficult, but I promise you it does get a little bit harder. So this next one says, I got my feet washed, I took the bread and the cup, and then I took the money and ran. So I'm going to give you a few seconds, talk to the people around you. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the answer is Judas. This next one says, I lived in the desert and helped get things ready for my cousin's arrival. Even though I wouldn't dare help with his shoelaces, I was happy to immerse him. And give you a few seconds, think about it, think about all of the characters in the Bible that you know. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the answer is John the Baptist. So guys, we've done 3. Let me know in the chat how many out of 3 you've gotten correct. Don't worry if you haven't gotten any correct yet. There's lots more chances. This next one says, I was a shady businessman. I was so determined to see Jesus, I climbed a tree. Later, we had lunch together. Here's a hint, guys. You may have learned a song about this man. He has a funny name. I'm going to give you a few more seconds. This is a little bit of an easy one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The guy is Zacchaeus, and he was a wee little man. The next one says, while it's cold without my special coat, I'm glad to move to a warmer climate where dreams really do come true. I'm going to give you a few seconds. Think about the special coat. That's a good hint. And in 3, 2, 1, this character is Joseph. Okay, guys, we have a few more. We're about halfway. Keep going. I'm sure you're doing great. This next one says, raised by an adopted mom, my family became my foes. I spoke for God, though it wasn't always easy. For all my accomplishments, you might say I died without success. I'll give you a few seconds. This one is a little bit difficult. 3, 2, 1. The answer is Moses. Okay, guys, this next one says, I hated being helpful. I wanted to be judgmental. I didn't want the best for my neighbors, but that didn't stop God from using me to save them. And then I pouted. I don't know about you guys, but this does not sound like someone that I would want to be friends with. Sounds like God still used him. I'm going to give you a few more seconds, and then I'm going to reveal to you who this character is. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is Jonah. Guys, let me know in the chat how you're doing. I want to know how you've done so far. We're going to move on in 1 second. A few more to go. This next one says, at first I was feared and then beloved. Writing letters was my forte. Maybe I will pitch a tent and stay a while. Going to give you a few seconds. Listen to the keywords in this one. There's some good hints here. And in 3, 2, this character is Paul. We all know Paul wrote quite a few letters in his lifetime. This next character description says, as an orphan, I would not reveal my roots. Even when I became royalty, I still had hid my origin story. But in the end, I saved my people from death. Guys, this is one of the last ones. Finish strong. Think about it for a second. Talk with the people around you. I'm going to reveal the answer in 1 second. Okay, and 3, 2, 1. I hope you're ready. This character is Esther. Okay, guys, this is our bonus round. I'm going to give you a second. Count up how many you've gotten so far. I want to know how many you have been able to guess correctly. This bonus round is worth 2 points. It is a little bit difficult. The character description for this says, I carried a king, spoke for God, and helped fulfill Scripture. I'm going to give you a little bit longer to think about this. It's really hard. And then I'll reveal it to you. Okay, guys, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I hope you're ready. The answer to this character description is a donkey. Okay, guys, if you got that, I want you to put it in the chat because I certainly didn't get it the first time. I have had so much fun with you this morning, guys. I hope I get the chance to do this again. Let us know in the chat how you did, and we're gonna move on to a song that a lot of you kids are gonna know. So if you know this song, get ready to do the actions. I know you know them. Teach your parents and the people around you. Can't wait to sing it with you. Have a good morning, guys.
Surf's up, dude. Your love pours down, splashes all around. It's as big as the biggest waterfall. Your love soaks me so completely, till I'm drenched in the sweetest rainfall. And I will shout out loud, whoa, it's all over me. And hey, I cannot believe that, yeah, your love crashes down. It's like riding a wave. Whoa, makes me wanna dance. And hey, throw up both my hands when, yeah, your love crashes down. It's like riding a wave. It's like riding a wave. Your love. Your love pours down, splashes all around. It's as big as the biggest waterfall. Your love soaks me so completely, till I'm drenched in the sweetest rainfall. And I will shout out loud, whoa, it's all over me. And hey, I cannot believe that, yeah, your love crashes down. It's like riding a wave. Whoa, makes me wanna dance. And hey, throw up both my hands when, yeah, your love crashes down. It's like riding a wave. It's like riding a wave. Your love. And I wanna go deeper, deeper, where the waves are higher, higher. And I wanna go deeper, deeper, till all I know is your great love. It's all over me, and I cannot believe that your love crashes down. It's like riding a wave. Whoa, makes me wanna dance. And hey, throw up both my hands when, yeah, down. It's like riding a wave. It's like riding a wave. And it's like riding a wave. Your love.
Morning, church. We're so excited for you to join us this morning. We've got a crew here made up of teams from Vaughan and from Bolton as well. And we want to invite you to sing with us, to clap your hands, to stand if you'd like. Just join with us, however the Lord leads you this morning. Let's sing together, church. Higher than the mountains that I face. You were higher than the mountains that I face. You were stronger than the power of the grave. You were constant in the trial and the change. One thing remains. Sing again. You were higher than the mountains. You were higher than the mountains that I face. Stronger than the power of the grave. You were constant in the trial and the change. This one thing remains. One thing. This one thing remains. Sing it. Your love never fails. 'Cause your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love. And on and on. And on and on and on and on it goes. For it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever had to be afraid. This one thing remains. This one thing remains. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love. And it's everything like this promise, come on. In life, I'm covered and covered by the power of your great love. And my day is paid. There is nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love goes on and on. Goes on and your love goes on and on. And on and on and on and on it goes.
Well, I have a question for you today as you tune in. Have you achieved greatness? Now, even as I say that, some of you are like, well, greatness, I mean, that's kind of, okay, I have a few more followers on my YouTube channel, but that's, not really greatness. Greatness is for people that are older, right? Maybe you're a kid and you're like, no, like greatness, that's not something kids do. Or maybe that's for a select group of people, and the rest of us ordinary people in our ordinary lives with our not so extraordinary talents or skills. I mean, that's really greatness is not for us. And you might think that actually, even as we start a series over this month of our All Together Now services, where we're kind of really focusing on the fact that we are a multi-generational community of people tuning in. And so even if this is your first time and whatever age you might be, we're taking a look at different stories of greatness and saying, what is the secret of greatness? That I would encourage you to say, no, don't tune out and think, oh, that couldn't be me. Because actually, over the next 5 weeks, each of us is going to talk about a different person. They're not someone from the Bible or whatever. They're just an ordinary person like you or me. Maybe some of them you've heard of, but I would guess a lot of them you haven't, or maybe you've heard their names, you really didn't know much about them. And then what you will find, interestingly enough, is that in their stories of greatness, almost all of them had lives of hardship, difficulty, and circumstances that many of us would say, well, there's no way any greatness or even anything good can come out of that. And I don't know about you, but that gives me hope. Because even in difficult times, even if you're someone who's saying, never mind great, I'm barely scratching the surface, if good seems like a pipe dream right now, that these are stories that can actually give us hope of people whose lives was changed by their faith, and then through their faith, they changed the lives of others. And so it's my pleasure today to introduce to you Dr. John M. Perkins. Now, John Perkins, he's actually 90 years old. He was born in 1930 in rural Mississippi. And at that time, he was a black person born in a black family. And so what that meant is, as a black family, your way to make a living was to be sharecroppers, to work picking cotton and harvesting other crops on the fields and on the land of white landowners. If you were a black person, you didn't own any land, you were able to make a very small amount of money. And when we talk about small amount of money, in today's dollars, it would be like if you were a family of often 5 or 6 or even up to 10, because maybe many kids or multiple families living on the same farm or same property, that you'd be making $100 a month in today's dollars. Like that's how much money you would have to get by for the entire month. For some of us, that's a cell phone, not even a cell phone bill. And so that's what it was like if you were living in rural Mississippi. But Mississippi at that time, even more so, was a state that was very racially divided. And not just divided, but where it was unequally divided. That if you were a black person in Mississippi, there was separate everything. Even here we have a picture of a separate drinking fountain, but there were separate schools, there was separate entrances. If a building was supposed to be shared by both, whites had one entrance, blacks had a different one. Economic opportunities, anything that you could think of that could be divided was divided. And if you were a black person or a black family, you did not have the advantage. Even, we signs like this, we wash for white people only. So even services or businesses had the option to say, well, no, we won't serve you. And this was the world that John M. Perkins was born into. In John's case, though, it wasn't just that he was a black person born into Mississippi in 1930. But John's life tragedy continued, difficulty continued. When he was just 3 months old, he was the youngest of 5 children. His mother passed away from malnutrition. And so at 3 months old, he wasn't even old enough to remember or know, his mother died. And shortly after his mother died, his father left. And so 5 children on their own went to live with their grandmother. And they became sharecroppers. John, even at the young age of 8, began working, picking cotton, and running businesses, trying to do whatever he could to bring in just enough money so that his family together and his siblings could have the next meal. He said that even at the age of 10, he figured out pretty quickly it's going to be impossible for a black person to own any land or run any business. And if you don't own any land or run any business, you're not going anywhere. This is going to be your life. Tragedy actually struck John's life when he was 16 years old. His older brother, Clyde, had gone to the army and had come back and was in the downtown area of Mendenhall, which is the town that they lived in Mississippi. And he was hanging around with some friends, getting ready to go to a movie. And the Perkins family were known as sort of people who never stood down from anyone, even when they should. And there was a white sheriff who was patrolling the area where the area of town and the time of day where blacks were allowed to come out and congregate and go to movie theaters. And apparently his brother Clyde was yelling at somebody in an argument, and the sheriff called out to him and said, "Hey, be quiet." And his brother Clyde turned around and spoke back to the sheriff, at which point he got hit in the head with a club. And as the sheriff went to hit him again, Clyde did what he should never do, and he grabbed it to stop it. And the sheriff let it go and stepped back and pulled out his gun and shot him twice in the stomach. Now, John was in another part of the town, and he got word that his brother had been shot and was on his way to the hospital. So John, at 16, piled in the car with a couple other friends, and they raced to the hospital. And he said, "I'll never forget getting into that room. There was a doctor there. There was about 8 other black people who were friends of Clyde and family. And I was holding my brother in my arms, watching him die, while the sheriff who had shot him stood in the room, looking at everybody in the eye, making sure there was no more trouble to be had that night." He said, waves of anger came into my life at that night, but it was replaced by a deadness. And he basically concluded, I've got to get out of this place. There's nothing good for me in Mississippi anymore. There's no way to make it here. There's no way to get justice. He said even when his brother got shot, nobody inquired. There was no investigation. There were no questions. The assumption was the officer probably did what he was supposed to do. The black man did what he wasn't supposed to do, and that's how it ended up. And he said, this is what life is like, and he had had enough. And so he decided to go to California. California was one of those places where there was a little more equality, where some of the desegregation laws had actually been put into practice, and there were just more economic opportunities. And John said he was leaving Mississippi and headed to California with 3 convictions in his heart. One was making money is the path to freedom. He said, I had seen it enough from the time I was 8 years old, working on land that somebody else owned, giving away 50% of what you made to them and barely living on the rest. I knew you had to be able to own stuff and buy stuff and have work for yourself, or even better, have other people work for you. So he said, making money is my path to freedom. The second conviction was all white people were to be hated. He said, I was moving quickly to a place where every person who was white was hated in my books. And thirdly, he said, God and the church were meaningless to him. And that last one, you might think, well, where did that come from? Here's what he said. I had seen Southern brutality, and the church had kept silent about it. I was convinced that the problem of my people were political problems. And the black church I knew, with its emotion and all, never did anything, never said anything about that either. Obviously, if I had no use for the black church, I could hardly even imagine something called a white Christian. It was totally impossible for me to imagine that the white church, the private club of oppressors, had anything to do with reality and justice. And so John went on his way with those convictions on to California. And the truth was, he actually managed to build himself a pretty good life. He married a young woman named Vera May, and they had a few kids, and things got really good for them. He was actually able to buy a house. Vera was running a business out of that house. He was running a couple of businesses. They were making money, and he had basically established for himself the dream, or the thing that he thought that he needed that would actually give him independence, comfort, and in a sense, he said, I was a long way from the problems of Mississippi. I had actually achieved it. And Vera May, even when she was marrying John Perkins, her family said, well, the Perkins aren't so good to hang around with. They had proved them wrong too. Here they had built themselves quite a nice life. But John said this, success and money were my religion, but I was not happy. I had no peace inside. And this is where John was at until he met someone who would change his life. Vera May had actually started going to church a little bit, and he would occasionally go with her. But he said his son Spencer started going to these Bible studies for kids down the road at this church. And as that began to happen, something changed in John's life. And here's what he said. I watched our son. I could see something was developing in him that was beautiful, something I knew nothing about. I'd had no real experience before of seeing Christianity at work like that in a person's life. At work in a way that was beautiful and good. Spencer kept after me to go with him to his Bible class. And because I loved him so much, I finally decided to go. Besides, his life had become so radiant, I wanted to go and find out what they were teaching him down there. I found they were teaching the Bible. Shortly after that, on one Sunday morning, as the minister was preaching about Jesus and that he had come to offer forgiveness and new life, John realized in that moment, wait, Christianity isn't a title. It isn't a thing that describes someone, oh, they're this or they're that. He said Christianity is a way of life where Jesus actually begins to come into your life and he lives a new life through yours, that your life completely changes. He said, I realized my motivation and my idea that money was the way out. I had actually had it, and I still had no peace inside. And Jesus was offering me actually a new way to have peace on the inside and a new life to follow, a new passion to pursue. And so that morning there in the church, John said he surrendered his life to Jesus. And he said, okay, take over. And as Jesus began to change his mind and his heart, he began to read scripture. He said, two amazing things happened. He said, I met black people whose lives had been changed by Jesus, and I met white people whose lives had been changed by Jesus. And my whole way of seeing the world began to change. I realized that Jesus had given me a whole new purpose than just making money and having a comfortable life. But things started to get stirred up again as Jesus began to ask John to follow him somewhere he never expected. And this is what he says. I couldn't escape a conviction growing up inside of me that God wanted me back in Mississippi, to identify with my people there and to help them break the cycle of despair, not by encouraging them to leave, but by showing them new life right where they were. See, John discovered something about this life with Jesus, that it wasn't just about the forgiveness and grace that Jesus was offering John. It wasn't just a new way of seeing the world, but Jesus was actually inviting him to let go of a dream of a comfort and a big home and being away from the problems and the troubled life that he had growing up, that Jesus was actually saying, hey, my love is strong enough to actually bring you back. And you have a responsibility not just to follow me, but if you're following me, to wherever I lead you. And I'm leading you back because I care about the place that you left. I care about your people even more than you do. And so he and Vera Mae, they sold their house. They moved their kids back to Mississippi, back to Mendenhall, to the small town that he grew up in. They bought a house in the black area of town, which was a much smaller place than they were ever living in before. And they began to work and live there. Things got more interesting for them, but it definitely got harder too. John, as he began to teach, and he'd become a pastor by then, he began to teach children the Bible because he saw what it had done in his own son's life. But he began to go around to every church he could, trying to tell them, hey, the love of Jesus means that equality has to come to Mendenhall. The love of Jesus means that the walls that are dividing race have to come down. The love of Jesus means that civil rights have to come to people who don't have them. And he said, I was shocked at how many people were not interested, or even more so were against that message. He said some white people obviously were not interested in that message. He said, but many of the black churches I went to were not interested either, because they were like, hey, life is the way it is, and we've all found a way to just survive in it. Why are you bringing this disruption? Well, one day John got a call about a young boy who had come out of church one morning, and he was about 16, and if you're a 16-year-old kid, imagine yourself walking out of church one morning, and the police are waiting for you, and they arrest you, they put you in a car, they beat you up, and they take you to jail because you called a white girl and asked her out on a date. And so John got the news that young Roy, I think Roy Hobbs was his name, was in jail for this. And so John and another pastor and a friend of his from California, a white man named Doug, had come with him, and they said, let's go to the jail, let's get this guy out. And a whole bunch of kids had heard about it too. Word had traveled around. He said, so now I have a bunch of teenagers coming with me to the jail, some of whom are my own junior high kids, like my own kids. So he thought, okay, well, we don't know what we're going to do, but we just got to get there and say this boy should not be in jail. Well, they kind of surprised the jailer who was there, and out of fear, he threw them all in jail. So now 17 of them are in jail, plus this young man who was already in before, and everyone's freaking out. And it was one of those things where they didn't know what to do, so he just decided, well, I'm going to throw them in jail. Well, John finally convinced him to let the kids go after several hours. But by this time, hundreds of people had gathered around the jail outside. And so now John and his friend Doug from California are in jail. The police are not releasing him. All of the people are outside kind of chanting and protesting and saying to get him out. John says he was in that jail. He said, I could hear them all. In fact, I could see them all from the second floor, and I was looking out the bars at them. And he said, in that moment, I felt like the Holy Spirit of God come up to me. And he said, I knew it was time for a sermon. He said, so I began to preach. And I told them two things. He said, one, we are never going to return violence for violence. We cannot take revenge. But then I also said, we cannot sit by and let this keep going on. He said, we will not fight with violence, but we will not let this go. So he said, even as I was preaching, we had this idea, let's begin to boycott all of the stores. It was Christmas time. And so instead of kids going home that night and making signs for Santa, milk and cookies, they made signs that said, don't shop here anymore. Here's one of the signs. Don't buy where you can't work. Or we're dreaming of a black and white Christmas. And kids and other black people all over the towns who didn't even know what was going on started to protest and say, we're not going to buy anything at Christmas from store owners because who wouldn't hire them, but they just wanted their money. And sure enough, the store owners started putting pressure on the police to say, let these guys out of prison. Well, they finally did get out of prison. But as they came out, they said, listen, we started to march because they said, we need civil rights. And some of the civil rights, they said, we need equal opportunity. 30% of the people in this town are blacks, but a far less percentage of them are actually employed in good jobs. We have almost nobody in public office in government or policing. We don't have equal opportunities for schools. The white schools have way more funding than the black schools. They need to be desegregated. And they said, we need to be able to vote. And these were pictures from some of the marches that were going on at that time. Many of the students from a nearby college got involved as well. Now, the police didn't do anything, didn't throw anybody in prison, but John said we noticed they were taking pictures of all the marches and protests, and they were writing down names. And he said, we didn't know why, but we soon found out. About a month later, and after one of the protests, John got a call that the busload of college students going back to their college after a protest had been taken over by police. Many of the students had been beaten up, and they had been thrown in prison. So John and his friend Doug, that's him in the middle, and another Reverend Curry said, we got to go down and help these students. I mean, we were the ones that helped them get involved in these protests. But John said, we were worried that the same thing would happen to us. So he said, sure enough, we drove on the highway, we crossed the county line into Rankin County, which was even a more oppressive and racially divided county than Mendenhall was. He said, but nobody did anything to us. We got to the jail, but as soon as we got to the jail, we realized it was a trap. He said 2 officers grabbed us and threw us in jail, and then 12 policemen came into the cell with us. And for the next several hours, he said we were beaten so badly, Doug and I lost consciousness several times during that. It happened so badly. And he said I literally thought I was going to die. His wife came to see him, and there was a police officer standing there, and she sort of put her arms around him and whispered, and it came close so that they could hear each other without the police officer hearing. He said, Vera, you have to get me out of this tomorrow. I don't think I'll last another night. They're going to kill us in here. You know, even after all of that and they got out of prison, they were charged by the police. And you know what the charge was against John? That he had convinced a minor to stay in prison when they were originally locked up with his junior high kids by the police. And then later, there was a charge of disturbing the peace. The sheriff and all of his highway patrol who did the beating that night lied, said they didn't do any of it. And ultimately, none of it was heard well in court, and their case was thrown out. And John was still left with a charge of disturbing the peace. I know it's so hard for us to think about and imagine what it would be like to be in a situation like that, to feel like not only you have enemies, but to feel like there's no hope of getting justice for you, that nothing can be done simply because of the color of your skin. And I got to thinking, what would Jesus say to John Perkins about his life, about his situation, if Jesus was the one who led him back there? Well, interestingly, Jesus, in the time that he walked this earth, the people he talked to, actually the details were different, but in many ways they were people under the same kind of oppression as the black people were in Mendenhall. They were people that were occupied by a brutal military empire called Rome. that who were oppressed, who were taxed heavily up to 95%, and who at any point in time could be thrown in prison or lose their life for saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or looking the wrong way. And yet to that group of people, of which Jesus was one, Jesus said something that is so stunning. And I want you to hear it as the scriptures read for us today.
Good morning. My name is Bree. I'm from the Vaughn site. This morning I'll be reading the scripture from Matthew 5, verses 43 to 48. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. This is the word of the Lord.
What? Jesus, you can't be serious. Love your enemies? Jesus was actually pointing out that in that day, there was a saying, and in fact, the rabbi's teaching was, love your neighbor, but hate your enemy. Because their enemies were doing the same kinds of things to them that the people that John was dealing with in his town and all over parts of the United States at that time, and really all over the world. And Jesus' message was, love your enemies and do good to those who hurt you. I don't know about you, but that's actually a hard message to hear. To be honest, as I've been reading John's story and listening to him and watching some of his videos, I'm feeling anger and hate well up in me. I don't know about you, but I want the story to end like a lot of the superhero movies me and my kids watch, where somebody comes in and cracks heads and gets revenge. That even though we don't want to, eventually we have to use violence, we have to use force. That's the only way for good to triumph over evil. And you know, John, in a sense, thought that too. He said when he was lying in that cell, in and out of consciousness, he said to himself, if I had a bomb right now, I would set it off in this place and blow everything up. He said, I could feel the same hate that was directed to me welling up in me. And so what did Jesus say to John M. Perkins? Because he did speak. And I want you to watch this video as John tells the story, because about a year after that, when John finally got out of prison and he was still in courts, his health actually got worse. And some of the effects, the after effects from what he experienced that night, he had a heart attack and then major ulcers in his body. And he said to the point his body was shutting down. And so he was in a hospital bed for 3 months. And in that place, Jesus came and spoke to him. And I want you to watch this video that describes what he said to him.
I didn't want no white folks around me, but they was all around me. One of my doctors was white. He would come and sit with me every night at the hospital until I go to sleep. Every night. In that broken moment, that I was outloved by those people I needed to hate. If you don't forgive, you sort of have the pains of others as well as your own pain. I've come to the place now that I see humanity as broken equally. We need to try to turn this into a language of love. We need to turn it into beauty.
In that place, Jesus met John. And in his book, Let Justice Roll, he says this: in that moment, the Spirit of God helped me to really believe what I had so often professed, that only in the love of Christ is there any hope for me or for those I had once worked so hard for. After that, God gave me the strength and motivation to rise up out of my bed and return to Mendenhall and spread a little more of his love around. Oh, I know humanity is bad, depraved. There's something built into us that makes us want to be superior. If the black man had the advantage, he'd be just as bad, just as bad. So I can't hate the white man. The problem is spiritual, black or white. We all need to be born again. It's a profound, mysterious truth. Jesus' concept of love overpowering hate. I may not see its victory in my lifetime, this victory of love overpowering hate, but I know it's true. I know it's true because it happened to me. On that bed full of bruises and stitches, God made it true in me. He washed my hatred away and replaced it with a love for the white man in rural Mississippi. I felt strong again, stronger than ever. And so John returned back convinced that the love of Jesus was not only strong enough to say, I'm going to give you a better purpose than just trying to make money, and money isn't the only way out. That I'm someone who's going to actually give you a new purpose. That I'm someone who's so relevant to your life, that I am so interested in the cause of the white and the black people in rural Mississippi. And my love is strong enough to wash away your hatred. But you know, one of the things that I think is so interesting and it's so important for us because we can hear these words of like, love your enemies, and we can think, oh, that means don't hate anymore. And that's true. That's what God did in John's heart. It means forgiveness. And yes, it does. And that's what God was leading John to do. But it also means action. It doesn't mean that we just let things go. He said, remember, we don't return hate for hate. We don't return violence for violence, but we do campaign for change. If we actually love not only black people, but also white people, and we hate the systems and the sin that is perpetuating the conflict and the hatred, then to love our enemies is actually to take action to do something about it. And this is so important. And if you read the rest of what John and Vera May began to do, they didn't just preach the gospel of Jesus and his power to forgive and to turn hatred into love. They said, if we truly love Jesus, we're also going to do these things. We're going to fight in court for equal rights, for fair trials. We're going to march and we are going to boycott. We are going to get the attention. And John said the reason we marched was not just to show unity with our black community, but to compel our white brothers and sisters who also claim to be Jesus followers to move them to action. We had to show them, we were demonstrating we need you. He also said we had to start co-ops. You see, it wasn't enough just to educate a black person, he said. He said we could be educated as black people, which means we could read and write and speak. He said, but for many of us, all that meant was we would be better servants in the houses of people who owned what we were doing. He said we needed to teach black people how to run a business, how to manage finances, how to accumulate resources and manage people. And so he said we started businesses. We started a health clinic. He said it was a health clinic that we took over that had a front door for whites and a side door for blacks. And the waiting area for whites was furnished and large and carpeted, and there was a back room for blacks. And no black person could be served until all of the white people had been served. And so he said the first thing we did when we took over that clinic was we tore down the wall and we carpeted the whole area and we served all people, black people and white people equally, whoever had a need. But we also started stores, grocery stores, and places that people could work together to actually learn how to be managers and business owners and how to turn resources into wealth. He said all of this was a part of what we did. He said we were also changing mindsets. He said we lost that case in court about us being wrongfully accused. The judges decided on a 2-3 majority the police had done nothing wrong to us. But you know what we won? He said the black people of Mendenhall saw a young black woman as a lawyer standing up there and arguing with a white justice establishment. They saw a black man go into court and come out without being thrown in jail again. And he said that was a victory. He said we were changing the mindsets. Many years later, the governor of Mississippi would say to John, we needed you to fight for equal rights for blacks, not just for the black people in our town, but so we as white people could have our minds changed as well. And so what does that mean for us as we are people? Maybe there's some aspects of this story that you can relate to. Any of you that have experienced racism directly, for sure you can relate to this. But maybe most of us, I know certainly in our home, and I would say with my kids and my family, would say, well, I don't have any enemies. It doesn't seem to be people who are actively against me. But if we take John's story seriously, we say Jesus' call to love our enemies is not just about forgiveness, not just about turning hatred into love. It's also about action. And so as you reflect on this story, I just wanted to leave you with a couple of things to think about. For some of you, it may be simply having an attitude that works to include the excluded. All of you in the schoolyard, all of you, who are eventually going to head back to school, I'm sorry about that. But you are going to face and be in contexts where naturally, we just see this as the natural way of human beings to include and exclude. That we would be people that say, no, we are going to be includers. We are going to be those who open the doors, who tear down walls that separate. This is what it means to love enemies, to ensure that there is no one treated as someone as an outsider. And so what does that mean? To think of somebody specific in your life, on your street, in your class, in your schoolyard, or in our church or in your church community where they kind of seem to be on the outside and others seem to push them there. What does it mean to include them? For others of us, it's speaking up for those who need other people to carry their cause. Not just saying, oh, that's good that they're doing that, but actually to say, hey, we need to speak up. And any of you that are older, that are adults, and you have kids at home, ask them about this. Talk to them about what they think is going on in the world around us right now, what they feel compelled to do, because they probably have a better clue than we do about where we need to start and who we need to speak up for. And what does it mean for those of us that have privilege and power to use whatever influence we have in the service of others? And then what does it mean to take risks to help? Maybe for some of us, it means letting go of a dream that we achieved or that we're on our way to achieving, to let actually God maybe redirect a choice, redirect a career choice. Maybe for some of you, as you're younger, as you're still contemplating, what am I going to do when I grow up for a living? Maybe you're going to start to study something and say, what would it mean for me to become a lawyer, to become a politician, to be involved in civil service or government or social work or something like that, to say, I can make a difference, to take a risk, to say, I want my life to be used by God because this is what it means to love our enemies, so that no one lives and continues to live under the oppression of sin and systems that cause hatred, racism, and violence. As we close today in a few minutes, we're going to take communion together, and Pastor Dave is going to lead us in that. But first, the band's going to lead us in a song. It's a song that's written actually from the Lord's Prayer, or some of you grew up in the tradition where it was called the Our Father. I want you to sing that song, or if you don't know, you can just listen to the words in the context of what we've been talking about today. And the chorus just repeats this phrase, your love is strong, your love is strong, your love is strong. And I just want to invite you as you listen or as you sing along or whatever, that you would be reminded of just how strong the love of God is. Strong enough to actually enable us, it says at one point, to see your kingdom come, to your will be done, that earth would begin to look a little bit more like heaven. And so even as you do that, just experience, I want to invite you to experience the love of God giving you strength. And then as we take communion together.
Heavenly Father, you always amaze me. Let your kingdom come in my world and in my life. Give me the food I need to live through today. temptation and deliver me from the evil one. I look out the window, the birds are composing. Not a note is out of tune or out of place. I walk to the meadow and stare at the flowers, better dressed than any girl on her wedding day. So why should I worry? So why should I worry? Why do I freak out? You know what I need. Yes, you know what I need. Your love is, your love is, your love is strong. Your love is, your love is, your love is strong. Your love is, your love is, your love is strong. The kingdom of the heavens is now advancing. Invade my heart, invade this broken time. Yes, Lord. The kingdom of the heavens is buried treasure. Would you sell yourself to buy the ones you found? Two things you told me, that you are strong and you love me. Yes, you love me. Your love is, your love is, your love is strong. Your love is, your love is, your love is strong. Your love is, your love is, your love is strong. Our God in heaven, hallowed be thy name above all names. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us weary sinners, and lead us far from our vices, and deliver us from these prisons. Yeah. Two things, and two things you told me, that you are strong and you love me. Yes, you love me. And two things you told me, that you are strong and you love me. Yes, you love me.
Something that we look forward to here at the Well is taking some time together for communion. Perhaps you've heard of this practice referred to as the Lord's Supper or the Eucharist or something like that. For us, we view it as the opportunity to remember and to celebrate what Jesus has done for us, to celebrate his love for us and the work that he has done in order to give us new life and love for him and one another. I hope by now you've had a chance to go and grab some bread or crackers, some pita, and some juice so we can participate in this together. Again, even though you are where you are and I am where we are excited that we get to be doing this together. Earlier on in the lockdown, my wife Sandra and I began to miss good coffee. We're not by any stretch connoisseurs or coffee snobs or anything like that, but we do enjoy coffee from various coffee shops and various cafes. And at home we had a Keurig. Sometimes we put on the drip. Sometimes I would even do a French press kind of thing. But our Keurig was kind of getting old and was kind of getting gross, and we wanted some type of normalcy. And for us, it looked like some good coffee. And so we started talking about getting a Nespresso machine. I think I may have just heard a scoff of disgust from all of you who are coffee purists, if you'd prefer to be referred to that way. You wouldn't drink it anyway unless it was made with an AeroPress or a Chemex or pour over or something like that. But bear with me. Hopefully there's something in this for all of us. Not long after we started talking about getting this Nespresso machine, go figure, our social media accounts started getting ads from Nespresso showing us all of these different machines that were on sale. And I don't know whether or not it was the Google bots that was creeping on us or what it was. We ended up scoring a really good deal on one, and so we bought it. Along with the coffee machine, we also bought these clear mugs. Now, I don't know about you, but for me and for my wife Sandra, there's something about drinking a coffee out of a clear cup that just makes the experience better. I don't know if that's just us and we're a little strange, but alas, here we are telling you about it right now. It's actually now become kind of like this morning ritual where we love watching the coffee pour into the machine, and then we love watching the crema as it forms on top and as it dissipates into the rest of the coffee. And then there's that moment where you take the cream and you pour it in. And again, you coffee purists, please don't log out on me. Just hang tight. Just stick with me, okay? There's that moment where you actually take the cream or the milk or whatever it may be, and you kind of pour it in. And when you do, you watch how the cream actually begins to mix in with the coffee. And it's almost like this beautiful kind of artistic thing. And now in the morning, we're pretty, I guess, easy to impress, but that has become something that's been really cool for us. Now, coffee might not be your jam. Coffee might not be your thing. Maybe you're younger, maybe you just don't like coffee at all. Maybe for you, it's about cold milk and Nesquik. It's kind of the same thing. I have no idea how much Nesquik you're actually supposed to put in here, but does anybody actually measure the amount of chocolate syrup you put in your milk, or do you just kind of let it rip? That's kind of what we do in our house. And again, as you put it in, you see how the coffee, or rather the chocolate syrup just kind of mixes to the bottom, but then as you stir it, it starts to mix in and actually change the color of the milk. And it's kind of a little hard to pick up by comparison to the coffee, but yeah, now you can see that this is some delicious chocolate milk. And I'm actually a little bit lactose intolerant, and it's still really hard to beat how good that tastes. That just brings me back to being 7 years old. You know, watching the cream mix in with the coffee is pretty cool. Watching the chocolate syrup mix in with the milk is kind of cool. You get to see how they blend together and become this perfect mix. This isn't just about drinks in the morning or any other time of day. This idea of being completely mixed together can actually show us a whole lot about what communion is meant to represent in our lives. You see, our practice as a church has been to once a month spend some time in a service focusing on the loving sacrifice that Jesus made for us. Because of the brokenness that exists in the world around us, our relationship with God has been broken, as well as our relationship with other people. And if we're totally honest with ourselves, our relationship, even with ourselves, the way that we view ourselves is broken. We're not completely satisfied with it. And so when we take communion together, what we're doing is we're celebrating by being reminded about what Jesus did to fix and repair that which was broken. Scripture tells us that it's because of the great love that God has for people, meaning he loves us so much that he couldn't stand for us to be broken, for our relationship to be broken from him. He wanted to make it right with us. Because of that love that he has for us, it motivated him to send his most valuable and prized possession, his son, Jesus Christ, to earth to live, to show us how we ought to live, and to not only just show us and teach us, but to actually make it possible for our relationship with God and with others and with ourselves to be restored, to be made right again. And actually, that's what these communion elements represent to us. We have the bread, which we're told represents Jesus' body, that it was given up for us, that it was his acts of love and acts of service, that it was the teaching that he did, the way that he interacted with different people, that his body was actually given as a sacrifice to pay the price that was necessary to restore, to put back together our broken relationship with God. And then we have this other element. I'm using some simple grape juice, as our kids refer to it here, purple juice. That's what they call it. And this is meant to represent and remind us about Jesus's blood that was shed, meaning he actually died. He actually gave up his life for us to pay the price that we might be made right with him, with God, and with others. Now, it might sound really strange to you that we would want to celebrate and be thankful that Jesus died for somebody who died. Normally, you don't celebrate when somebody dies, or it seems a little odd maybe to do that, but there's a couple of reasons why we do. First, we're thankful that Jesus died in our place, because when we trust in him and when we follow him by living the way that he taught us, the way that he's constantly showing us, we begin to experience the fullness of life. We begin to experience forgiveness, and we get to see what the loving relationship with God is actually meant to be like, the way it was meant to be from the very beginning. Secondly, we can celebrate that Jesus died because we know that he didn't stay dead. Now, he was brought back to life on the third day. Now, that's not just awesome for Jesus. That's also awesome for us, because that's where we find our hope, that even though we will pass away, even though we will die in this life, we have hope that by our faith in Jesus, because of what he did, because of what is represented in these communion elements, we too can have life that will never end. What does all this have to do with coffee and cream and Nesquik and milk? That should be the question that's being begged by you right now. Well, just as the cream and the Nesquik mixed together with the coffee in the milk to the point where you couldn't actually separate the two anymore, in the same way, the love of Jesus and the faith that we have in him is meant to mix in completely with every single part of our lives. Now, just like you wouldn't be able to take the cream out of the coffee or the chocolate syrup out of the milk, in the same way, the love and the presence of Jesus can't be taken out or separated from us. Also, just like the cream and the chocolate changes the coffee and changes the milk, Jesus completely changes us too. We're no longer the same. Every part of us is impacted. We are transformed from the inside out. Our lives are completely influenced by him. We become fundamentally, completely different, and this is good news. Now, communion isn't just something that we made up. It's something that Jesus himself actually showed his earliest followers and invited them to participate in it in faith. You know, the biographies of Jesus tell us that he took some bread and he gave it to his followers and he told them to eat it. And then after that, he took a cup of wine. Again, we're using juice or something else. Maybe you're using wine. And he passed it around to his followers and he told them to drink it together. And so that's what we're going to do today. As followers of Jesus, maybe there's some of you who are saying today is actually the first day I want to begin following Jesus. I've heard about his love. I've understood his love. I want to continue experiencing it and learning more about it. Then I hope you'll join in with us too. So let's do this all together. Again, this is adults, kids, seniors, whoever you're at, in whatever age, whatever stage, we're all together in this. Grab some bread, let's do this together. As you prepare to eat it, remember that Jesus gave up his body for us. Say a short prayer of thankfulness, of gratefulness. However you might put that together, maybe that's one word, maybe you just say thanks. Maybe you have something bigger and longer that you want to pray. Whatever it is, in faith, be praying that prayer of thanksgiving and celebration, recognizing that Jesus did give his body. And let's eat together. Now take your cup. Take a moment, look at it. Make this an experience. This is not just a cup of juice. This is meant to represent to us Jesus' blood, the finality of his sacrifice. That he actually paid the ultimate price and gave up his life. He did something for us that we couldn't even do for ourselves. Remember too, that even though he died, he didn't stay dead. God resurrected him from the dead. And that's where we find our hope that we too can live forever. So again, with thanksgiving, with joy, with love, with celebration, and thanksgiving for the things that God has done for us in Jesus, we drink together. Let's pray. God in heaven, we are grateful for the tremendous sacrifice you made in sending your son Jesus to earth, that he might live like us and that he might show us how we were truly meant to live. Thank you, God, for your love that motivates you, that pushed you to do this tremendous thing, that we might have a relationship with you again, that we might be at peace with you, that we might be able to find restoration in the relationships that we have with other people, that we might even be able to have that better understanding of who we are and how we are meant to live. We are so thankful to you too, Jesus, that you didn't just teach us what to do or what to say, but you demonstrated it. And so even as you tell us to love one another, even our enemies, you can say that because you truly did that. You loved us even when we were at odds with you, even when we were your enemies. And we know that as we trust in you, as we follow you, you give us the gift of your Holy Spirit who moves into us, moves into our lives and begins to transform us from the inside out, making us new and fundamentally changed. All of this we celebrate and we thank you for. And we look forward to seeing the ways you're going to continue to do this in our lives as we follow you faithfully. I pray it in your name, Jesus. Amen. God bless you, church. I love you, and I love that we can do this together.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us at The Well today. If you are new, we'd love you to go online to thewell.ca/contact and just let us know you're there. We're not going to spam you or whatever, but you will get in contact with one of our pastors. If you need help, if you need prayer, if you need financial support, if you're just trying to figure out how to get more connected to this faith community, if you're trying to learn more about who Jesus is and what your story might be with him, we'd love you to reach out and contact us. And if you do need prayer, we actually have a Zoom room, a prayer room open where a couple people will pray for you. You can go to thewell.ca/prayer right after the service and log in. You'll be in a waiting room, and then I'll actually be hosting that today, and you'll have a chance to be prayed for. Just a couple minutes for whatever that's need, whether it's a prayer for physical healing or support or just something you pray on behalf of another person. We'd love for you to take advantage of that, even if you're totally new, even if you're just sort of watching from afar, you're not sure if you're a part of this community yet. We'd love to be able to pray for you. That's just a gift we'd love to offer. Otherwise,